My girlfriend of 10 years became pregnant by my younger brother just weeks before our wedding and left me to marry him. Now, 6 years later, something tragic has occurred, and my estranged family is asking me for a favor. I, a 31-year-old male, have been living separated from my family for the past 6 years due to a major incident that tore our family apart. I'll try to explain the whole situation as clearly as possible. 6 years ago, I was engaged to my high school sweetheart, Sarah, who is also 31 now. We had been together since we were 16 and were finally getting married at 26. Everything seemed perfect, and I was excited to start our life together. I met Sarah when we were both 16 in our high school biology class. We were lab partners, and I was immediately drawn to her intelligence and sense of humor. For our first date, I saved up my allowance for weeks to take her to a nice restaurant in town. I was so nervous that I accidentally knocked over my water glass, but Sarah just laughed and helped me clean it up. That's when I knew she was special. Throughout high school, I tried to make every moment with Sarah memorable. For her 17th birthday, I surprised her with a scavenger hunt around town, leaving clues at all our favorite spots. The final clue led her to our local park, where I had set up a picnic with all her favorite foods. I'll never forget how her eyes lit up when she saw it. When we went to different colleges, I was determined to make our long-distance relationship work. Every weekend, I'd make the 3-hour drive to visit her, no matter how much schoolwork I had. I'd bring her care packages during exam weeks filled with her favorite snacks, stress relief items, and handwritten notes of encouragement. After college, when we both moved back to our hometown, I worked extra shifts at my job to save up for a dream vacation for us. I surprised Sarah with a 2-week trip to Europe, something she'd always wanted to do. We visited Paris, Rome, and London. In Paris, I arranged a private boat tour on the Seine River at sunset. I can still picture how beautiful she looked with the Eiffel Tower glittering behind her. When Sarah mentioned she wanted to go back to school for her master's degree, I supported her completely. I took on a second job to help with her tuition and living expenses. I'd stay up late with her, quizzing her for exams and proofreading her papers, even when I had to be up early for work the next day. For our 10th anniversary, I planned a recreation of our first date. I reserved the same table at the same restaurant, wore a similar outfit, and even arranged with the waiter to accidentally spill my water. Sarah laughed so hard, saying it was perfect. After dinner, I took her to the beach where we had our first kiss and proposed under the stars. Looking back now, it's painful to think about all these memories. I put my heart and soul into our relationship, truly believing we were building a life together. It makes the betrayal sting even more, knowing how much I loved her and how easily she seemed to throw it all away. Sarah came to me with shocking news a few days before our wedding. She told me she was pregnant, but the baby wasn't mine. She had been cheating on me with my younger brother, Max, for a long time. She had done the math and was certain the baby was his. I was devastated and furious, but what hurt even more was when Sarah told me she had developed feelings for Max and wanted to marry him instead of me. It felt like my whole world was crumbling around me. In my anger and pain, I went to my parents and told them everything. I expected them to be as shocked and upset as I was, but to my surprise, they seemed oddly calm about the whole situation. My parents had always treated Max as their golden child, but I never expected this level of betrayal. They told me I should be happy for my brother. My mother was even excited about becoming a grandmother, completely disregarding how I might feel about the situation. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It felt like my entire family had turned against me in an instant. The people who were supposed to love me and support me were telling me to just accept this massive betrayal and act like everything was fine. Unable to cope with the betrayal from not just Sarah and Max, but my parents as well, I made the difficult decision to leave. I packed my bags, moved to a different city, and cut off contact with all of them. That was 6 years ago. In all that time, my father called me a few times, but those conversations were always strained and uncomfortable. My mother, Max, and Sarah never reached out to me at all. I didn't even know the name of Max's child, my own nephew. I tried to move on with my life as best I could. I focused on my career, made new friends, and even started dating again, though I found it hard to trust after what happened with Sarah. Still, I was slowly building a new life for myself away from the pain and betrayal of my past. Then, a few days ago, I got a call out of the blue from my mother. I was surprised to see her name on my phone screen after all this time. When I answered, she sounded upset and told me that Max had been in a terrible accident. He was now paralyzed and unable to work or take care of his family. I felt a mix of emotions hearing this news. Part of me was shocked and saddened to hear about Max's accident. Despite everything that happened, he was still my brother. But another part of me couldn't help but feel angry that after 6 years of no contact, this was the reason my mother was finally reaching out to me. What she said next made me even angrier. She told me that the family needed my help. Specifically, she wanted me to come back and step in as a father figure for Max's child and help Sarah take care of the family while Max recovered. I was furious. After everything that had happened, How could she possibly think this was an appropriate request? I told her absolutely not. I reminded her that Sarah and Max had betrayed me in the worst way possible, and that she and my father had chosen to support them over me. I said I had no obligation to help them now, especially after years of no contact. My mother got upset and accused me of being selfish. She said family should always come first and that I needed to let go of the past. She tried to guilt me by saying Max's child needed a father figure, and that Sarah was struggling to manage everything on her own. I stood my ground and refused again. I told her that Max and Sarah made their choice 6 years ago, and now they had to live with the consequences. I said it wasn't my responsibility to step in and play happy families just because things had gotten difficult for them. Before hanging up, I told my mother not to contact me again unless it was to apologize for how they had treated me 6 years ago. I said I might be willing to have a relationship with them again if they acknowledged how much they had hurt me, but I would never step in as a replacement for Max or a father figure for his child. After the call ended, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me felt guilty for turning my back on my family when they needed help, but a larger part of me felt angry and hurt all over again. The wound that had started to heal was now ripped open, and all the pain and betrayal came flooding back. I've been struggling with this decision ever since the call. On one hand, I know that Max's accident is not his child's fault, and I feel bad for the kid growing up without a fully present father. On the other hand, I don't think it's fair for my family to expect me to swoop in and fix everything after they betrayed me and then ignored me for years. Some of my friends think I'm justified in my decision. They say my family made their bed and now they have to lie in it. But others think I'm being too harsh and that I should at least consider helping for the sake of the child. I'm torn about what to do. Part of me wants to maintain the life I've built for myself, free from the drama and pain of my past. But another part wonders if I'm being too stubborn and if there's a way I could help without completely sacrificing my own well-being. Update 1. After weeks of struggling with my decision, I decided to visit Max in the hospital. I didn't plan on committing to anything. I just wanted to see the situation for myself. It felt like the least I could do, even if I wasn't ready to forgive or forget what had happened. Walking into the hospital was nerve-wracking. I hadn't seen any of my family members in 6 years, and I wasn't sure how I would react. When I entered Max's room, I was struck by how different he looked. He was pale and gaunt, hooked up to machines and barely able to sit up. It was a stark contrast to the confident, active younger brother I remembered. My parents were there too. They looked older, more tired, and weathered by time. When they saw me, they immediately tried to embrace me, but I stepped back, not ready for that level of intimacy. Then I saw her, Sarah. She was standing by Max's bedside, holding his hand and looking utterly exhausted. When our eyes met, a flood of emotions surged through me. Pain, anger, betrayal, and a sense of longing for the life we had planned together. Sarah tried to smile at me, but I couldn't bring myself to acknowledge her. Instead, I turned my attention to Max. I asked my father about his condition, and he explained that Max had suffered a severe spinal cord injury in a car accident. He was paralyzed from the waist down, and the doctors were unsure if he would ever walk again. As we were talking, a young boy walked into the room. I realized immediately that this was Max and Sarah's son, my nephew. He looked like a perfect blend of the two of them, and it hit me that I'd missed out on 6 years of his life. Sarah introduced him to me as his uncle, and I spent a few minutes talking to him. He was a sweet kid, but the interaction was awkward. It was strange to meet him under these circumstances, knowing the history that brought him into the world. When I left the hospital, I felt conflicted. Seeing Max in such a vulnerable state stirred feelings of sympathy, but the sight of Sarah and the memory of their betrayal reignited my anger. I knew I couldn't sweep everything under the rug, but I also couldn't ignore the fact that Max's son was an innocent party in all of this. Update 2. A few days after my visit to the hospital, my parents invited me to their house to talk. I reluctantly agreed, hoping we could have an honest conversation about everything that had happened. When I arrived, my mother wasted no time launching into a speech about family responsibility. She begged me to step in as a father figure for Max's son, help Sarah with household duties, and support them financially during Max's recovery. I listened silently as she spoke, my anger simmering just below the surface. When she finally finished, I told her exactly how I felt. I reminded her that 6 years ago, she and my father had chosen to support Sarah and Max after their betrayal. I told her it hurt that they never reached out to me during those years and only cared about reconnecting now that they needed something from me. I told her that I had spent years building a life for myself away from the pain they had caused and that I wasn't willing to throw all of that away to clean up their mess. I made it clear that while I sympathized with Max's situation, it wasn't my responsibility to fix his problems. I said that if they wanted to rebuild a relationship with me, they needed to acknowledge the hurt they had caused and respect my boundaries. My mother cried, and my father accused me of being cold and selfish. They argued that Max's accident had changed everything and that I should let go of the past for the sake of the family. I held firm, reiterating that I wasn't going to sacrifice my peace of mind for people who had betrayed me so deeply. Before leaving, I told them I was open to slowly rebuilding a relationship in the future, but only if they could genuinely respect my feelings and stop expecting me to play the role of savior. Update 3. It's been a few weeks since that meeting, and I've been working through my emotions in therapy. I've come to realize that while I care about Max's son and don't want to see him suffer, I can't compromise my own well-being to help my family. I've decided to maintain my boundaries and focus on healing the wounds they caused me. My parents have been calling and texting more frequently, but their tone has shifted slightly. They've started asking about my life, my career, and my well-being instead of just talking about Max and Sarah. It's a small step, but it gives me hope that they're starting to understand where I'm coming from. As for Max, I haven't visited him again since that day in the hospital. I'm still not ready to face Sarah, and I'm not sure when, or if, that will ever change. I've started to accept that some relationships might never be repaired, and that's okay. I'm focusing on building a life that brings me peace and happiness, even if it means letting go of certain family connections. For now, I'm taking things one day at a time. I'm grateful for the support of my friends, my therapist, and the community here on Reddit. Your advice and encouragement have helped me find the strength to stand up for myself and prioritize my own needs. Thank you for being a part of my journey.